Okay, who's ever been in a situation where you've driven abroad, say in a country that drives on the other side of the road?
Mm-hmm.
What's it like when you first start to drive on the other side of the road?
Really difficult.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a challenge, or vice versa.
Think about everything.
Yeah.
The right and left. Oh,
Yeah.
you're coming which way?
Yeah.
Roundabout. Oh crap! Roundabout.
Yeah. Well, you'll have adjusted now, and
Yeah,
so
yeah. Now if I come back to the UK, I'm like, oh crap.
you got to readjust. Yeah. No, that's interesting stuff that you're saying. And so think of a time when you had to cope with change. So, for example, driving, you go abroad, if it's America or somewhere else, and
Yeah.
or Europe, and you drive on the other side, and you've got to sort of adjust to it. Then you come back again, you got to adjust again, don't you? The other thing, the same, say like a mobile phone upgrade. You know, when you get a phone, you're sort of used to the navigation. Then all of a sudden, you've got to start learning how to take photos again, and you know, to do all the things that you did before. Because we don't use phones to make calls anymore. We just use them to take photos and put them on Instagram. But you know, you got to do it again. Or a new car. You know, all of a sudden you second gear, third gear, and the clutch is slightly different. You've got to sort of adjust to it. You decorate the office, and you know, you've moved the lights, and you go back there and you go to where the lights used to be, and they're sort of gone, or changing jobs. And so you're used to doing one thing, and then you've got to do something different. So automatically you do the old reaction. Your frontal lobes need to kick in to help you inhibit that now irrelevant action. In the front part of the brain, the frontal lobes kick in. Well, actually, that's not there no more. I'm doing this now, and so on and so forth. But before we begin, we'll do a bit of a test. A big test this is. And the test is called the Stroop test. It's named after Ridley Stroop. And it's a measure of selective attention that requires interference resolution, response inhibition, and response selection. So Stroop 1935. And we're going to do a couple of processes with you, and we'll see how we go. So everyone got their pens and papers and everything handy, and yeah, there's a prize for winning these tests. Yeah. The prize. So what we're going to do now is going to name the colours of the following words. The next slide is going to come up shortly. Do not read the words, rather say the colours, not the words. Okay, for example, if the word is blue printed in red, you should say red as fast as you can. Okay, if that makes sense. So, you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah. So what you do here, if it's printed in red, you should say red as fast as you can. Has anyone got a stopwatch handy? We'll see who can do it the quickest. Okay, so no, we've got a stopwatch. I think I should have one. I'll use my internal stopwatch. Okay, and we'll go from there. So you ready? So remember, name the colours of the following words. Do not read the words, rather say the colours, not the words. So if the word is blue, it's printed in red, then you should say red as fast as you can. Ready, set, go.
Red,
Red.
green, yellow, blue,
Green,
yellow, red, green, blue,
yellow, blue,
green, orange,
green, red, yellow.
Let's have a big clap. Keep one. Yay! We've got a winner. No, I'm still going, man. I'm stuck on pink. Is it pink or is it red? Yeah. Okay.
I did one wrong, which was orange.
Yeah. No, well, I disqualified. That's it.
Yeah.
Disqualified. Okay. The next step 2 is going to be ignore. So read the following text. So ignore the colours. Now read the actual text itself. So you're going to ignore the colours. Okay.
Blue, red, yellow, orange, brown, yellow, purple, red, green, orange, green, purple, green, yellow, red, purple,
Green,
blue, orange.
yellow, brown, red, blue, orange, green.
Okay. Kim again. I'm watching you, Kim. Yeah. Okay. So we'll sort of go back to the drawing. Now you sort of know what to expect anyway. We'll sort of have a play around, and so read the following text, ignoring the colours. It's your chance for redemption. Yeah. Okay. State the colours of the words. Ignore the actual words.
Red,
Green,
blue,
green,
yellow, green, black, yellow,
black,
green,
Yeah. Okay, I know what you're wondering. wondering, why is he doing this to me for? It's Saturday morning. I don't need this in my life. Yeah, there you go.
It's interesting with a white background as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah, it's interesting. In most cases, it takes longer to state the colours of the words rather than to read the text they're printed on. In most cases. Anyone find that? The case with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so everyone's normal in the group, we're all okay. There's always one in every group who's like, no, other way around for me. Yeah. The disagreeable person. Yeah. The speed of processing theory, the interference occurs because words are read faster than colours or names. So the word is read faster. It's selective attention theory. The interference occurs, we mentioned there, you can naming the colour requires more attention. Okay, so according to McLeod, we're so used to processing word meaning while ignoring the physical features of the word. That is a learnt response. Okay, the Stroop task requires us to do something which we've never learned, which is opposite to what we normally do. That's the challenge. Okay, now that you've done it, do you think it'll start to become easier? The second time around, was it a little bit easier, or?
I should think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, felt it.
Yeah, because you sort of you adapted to
Yeah.
to a point. Still not as easy
Mm.
because you've done the process for many years. You've done it one way, but equally in saying that, it's slightly easier, one would think, to a point. Okay, so there's a lot of research in there. If you want to read more about the Stroop test, McLeod 91, the papers are quite a good one, a review, and it reviews a lot of the research on there. The original reference to the Stroop paper is in 35. I believe you can still read this on the web. The complete paper is quite an interesting one. Stroop put together. That's if you decide you want to read more about it. But you will notice it's much harder to get the colour right when you're reading the words because the printed word distracts you as well. You're being distracted. Reading's automatic, and it takes effort to suppress the meaning it generates. So the Stroop task measures inhibitory control. Now then, what's quite interesting is, what we'll touch on now is the brain, very briefly, an evolutionary history of the nervous system, which applies to what we're covering this afternoon as well. So if we go back to hundreds of millions of years ago, you've got a simple organism, okay, in the beginning, and it was a move towards away stimuli. Have you ever gone to like a pond, for example, and sort of clap your hands and the sort of little fish go one way, the other way? The organism, so towards away stimuli. That's the very beginning, the evolution of the nervous system. Okay, that then integrates into a spinal cord, where you got more complex reflexes. Okay, the spinal cord. So can I just do a demonstration, please? If you, what happens? Good. So if I was to throw it out without telling you, what would you have done?
I would probably just caught it.
Possibly, yeah, because he's done it before.
Yeah.
Okay, so the reflex action.
I would have gone, ooh.
And that's a reflex action too. Yeah, exactly. I suppose what will have an effect in terms of catching it, the technique, the process of catching it, the skill is going to be how often you've done that or how often you do that. But that's not what I'm talking about. But you've got this integration of the spinal cord and more complex reflex.
Do you want that back?
No, you can. That's fine. That's okay. Now you have an organism that's got a brain stem to help control its organs. So the brain stem. Now, if you damage the brain stem, not good. You're in trouble. Okay, because the brain stem controls the organs. The brain stem, and you'll sort of have come across people who damage the brain stem and obviously life support and so on and so forth. Not that I'm a medical person, but from a brain point of view, the brain stem controls or helps to control the organs anyway. On top of the brain stem, you've got these are layers through evolution, in history, at a hypothalamus, and that's controlling our eating, drinking, and sexual reproduction. Now, there were experiments that were done, you've probably come across them before, and in like reading psychology, where they sort of cut parts of the brain out in animals, dogs and cats. I'm not saying it's an ethical thing. If there's any cat and dog lovers in the group, I'm just making reference to it. And they could still eats, drink, and sexual reproduction, just with the hypothalamus. Many, many years ago. Very unethical. Don't recommend doing it, but that shows you what the hypothalamus does. On top of the hypothalamus, you've got what we call a limbic system. The limbic system, we do a lot of referring to that in the course. So we can feel emotions. And the hippocampi, there's one on either side. Okay, and an amygdala that can remember. So the organism is becoming more and more complex. The brain is getting bigger. So with the amygdala now, what we can do, one of the functions is aversion. So we can understand now that certain situations are dangerous, whatever that situation might be. As I mentioned the other day, I made reference to amygdala. So I'm walking down the street and someone comes out as a teenager with a knife and starts pointing it like that. And even though the following day, or a few days after, when I walked down the street and he wasn't there, I still saw him, felt him, thought, what should I have done? Should I have fought back? Should I have sprinted? So the amygdala, one of the roles anyway, is aversive. But more to the point, on top of the limbic system, we've got a cognitive model. As human beings, we can do verbal communication. So verbal communication is what separates us from animals. Okay, in one respect, we can communicate. It hasn't always been the case. Language. Could you imagine a world without language? Pretty fascinating. If you go back a couple of 1,000 years ago, there's no language. So how does it implicate, well, what are the implications in what we're doing today? Well, one thing to think about, we're going to touch on today and through the course, is experiential communication. Because how do cats communicate? How do dogs communicate? How do animals communicate? Through sounds, sign language, through gesture. Precisely, and we limit our communication in therapy and coaching to what? To
Talk.
Precisely. But there's a whole different world there, isn't there? So if we go back to primal times, before we could communicate, much before my time, by the way, and I noticed Sarah there pouring herself a drink of water there. And let's say, for example, that I decide in my infinite wisdom, that looks good, okay? How would I ask for that? How would I say, because I've got the capacity, could you please pass that? No, I don't want to pass them, okay. But let's say, for example, without language, what would I do?
Gesture.
Precisely.
Points.
Yeah, precisely. I'd grunt. I'd be like, and you'd be like, yeah, I get a slap. Exactly.
Have you ever been abroad and you can't speak the language?
Yes.
So you're asking for directions or you...
Precisely.
And
Yes.
it's like
Yes.
two syllables.
Yes. Exactly. No, right. Exactly. You know, and that's a good opportunity when you go to one of the expensive restaurants to just do a runner. Yeah. Can you give me the bill, please? Out the back door. Yeah. Here's your tip. Next time, be quick. I'm not advocating doing that, by the way. No, please. But the point being, you got this model communication. You can speak language. It's conversely, we can communicate, which is really fascinating. And we're going to go into that in more detail tomorrow, by the way, and on the course on the next block, because it really is fascinating when you look at language. And another story for another day. So the point being is that if someone comes along to see you for a session, if they could think their way out of a problem, would they not have done that already anyway? Why would they see you for? It's like, well, what's the point of going to see you if they could have thought their way through the problem? Because the limbic association is where long-term memories and emotional responses affect how we behave, for the most part. Does that make sense? Because it's really deep. You know, in our brain, in these primal structures of the brain, because I shouldn't eat that cake after 10 o'clock in the evening if I'm trying to reduce in weight. I shouldn't smoke if you want to give up space. Logical's there. The logical answer's there. The person says they shouldn't love that person for whatever reason, but they keep going back. But the logic is there, but logic is only so much, isn't it, really? You've got this sort of emotional brain that, in the modern world, by the way, doesn't always lend itself really, really well with the world that we live in, the challenges that we face. But if you look at the interior association area, the frontal lobes, including the prefrontal cortex, that's vital for planning, decision making, and working memory. Okay, so you've got that sort of the frontal lobe. So all of a sudden you can plan, you can make decisions. You've got a working memory, which is really effective. How do we know the frontal cortex is important in executive functions? How do we know? Well, there's evidence. And what's the evidence, do you think?
Just from the likes of Phineas Gage.
Yeah, neuroimaging and neuropsychological cases of damage in the frontal lobe. Okay? fMRI. Prefrontal regions are active when volunteers engage in task. So you see when someone's doing a task, where the blood flow is going in the brain, where the brain's lighting up, where it's active, and you can sort of say, well, there's a very good chance that region is involved in that task or activity, and if there's damage there through trauma or stroke or through any other reason, like you mentioned, the Phineas Gage, then it has complications as well. So the frontal regions seem to be particularly important when planning new skills. Once the skill is well established, there's less involvement. So, okay, you move abroad, you start learning to drive, or you go on holiday abroad, and for a couple of weeks, and after the first few days, you start to adapt to driving, because they drive on the wrong side of the road, not us. It's not us. It could never be us, could it? And we start adapting to that. And then after you start adapting to it, when you've come back, you've got to just adapt to here again, but because you've done it here for much longer, it's probably easier to adapt. But you can sort of see the front part of the brain in the beginning, when you first learn to drive a car, lighting up like a Christmas tree, really consciously making the effort. And it can be really exhausting to learn new stuff, because you're really consciously trying to process things. A lot of metabolic energy is consumed. But when you learn new skills, then you'll see less involvement. It's on sort of cruise control in that respect. So you've seen research that those frontal regions are essential for flexibility, how we adapt to an environment, how you maneuver in an environment is important, how you readapt. So we mentioned earlier, if you're doing one thing a certain way for so long and that changes, how quickly can you adapt to that? And that has a lot of evidence that the frontal lobes are important for executive functions, which we've talked about. We've seen through research, well, not me specifically, but I've certainly read many research papers, of acquired damage and how that changes. Previously, quote unquote, healthy people have had head or injury or stroke, and the frontal lobes have been damaged, and that typically shows impairments in judgment and decision making. Okay, I'm sure you've all come across people who've had that.
Yeah, I got my dad at home, exactly that.
Yeah.
And we had to teach him to talk again. And it took us a week. Me and my brother were by his bed, and we would.
Wow. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
eventually
Yeah.
he was talking. Yeah.
Yes. That's what fascinating too as well. It's really fascinating in terms of the plasticity in the brain too. That's another story for another day. But if you look at psychiatric research, you'll see a lot of neurodevelopmental conditions are associated with impairments of executive function in the frontal lobe of the brain. For example, autism, schizophrenia, bipolar, major depression have all been linked to executive function deficits in the literature, in the papers. That's what the research suggests. The frontal area is important for mental health because of the implications of psychiatric and neurodevelopmental conditions and involved in abnormal functioning of the frontal lobes, especially the prefrontal cortex. Okay, that we don't have time to go into, but it's certainly worth reading if you get a chance to and research. The frontal cortex, it plays a huge role in higher cognitive processes termed executive functions. Okay, so we talked about before how you cope with change, how quickly you can cope with change. Now, in certain neurodevelopmental conditions, what happens when things change? How does a person respond to change if things aren't done in an orderly way? Or
They struggle, it's very uncomfortable, puts them out,
it can
a lot of stress.
It can be, precisely. So And he made the reference to Phineas Gage, if you haven't heard the story before, very, very briefly. It's a story of a guy called Phineas Gage, and he had an accident. He worked on the railway, I think it was in the 20s now, and a railway, and a rod went through his head, I believe. And he went to the doctor, and obviously they did the observation and so on and so forth. And I believe, well, it's said that he damaged the frontal part of the brain, but also what was said is that there was observations of his personality changed dramatically. He was like a mild-mannered person who, after the accident, when he recovered from that, he was far more aggressive, impulsive, couldn't hold a job down, you know. And people talk about that story in science and talk about how he changed dramatically. What really marvels me is the ability he still had after that. Because it was alleged, and I think I stand corrected, but he would then go and do like these shows across the country, and I think he'd moved to New York apparently. It became a novelty with what had happened. I think he still had the inhibition to do what he was doing. Really fascinating. That's sort of my take on it. But it does show he changes dramatically. So, you know, it's really fascinating in that sense how, you know, he goes from being a certain type of person to all of a sudden, after the accident, even after he recovered, just a whole different person, you know, unrecognizable in that respect. So executive functions are thought to involve the frontal lobes of the brain. They have a major impact on our ability to perform tasks as planning, prioritizing, paying attention, remembering details, and controlling emotional reactions. Okay, executive functions allows us to create a picture of a goal, plan to achieve the goal, the resources we're going to need along the way. So you might decide the goal is going to be to drive to a restaurant. Okay, that's an outcome. Then you've got a picture of that restaurant. You've got a plan of getting there by train or by car, and your resources along the way to get there. Whether you're booking an airline ticket, whether you're learning a new skill. One of the components of the functioning is to be able to do that. And if that's compromised, then what do you think happens? Well, ability is not as effective to do that. One thing to take into consideration, by the way, a young person's brain isn't fully developed, the maturation, until about 22, 24, some people say 22. But
different for boys and girls.
Yeah.
So they reckon.
Exactly. And for boys, it's 50-year-old.
Exactly.
No damn chance. Never mature, you know. You go backwards to Benjamin Button. Exactly. Yeah. But the point being, it's really fascinating to think about that, because you think you've got to make a career decision at 17, 18 for the rest of your life when your brain isn't anywhere near the maturation, which is really, really fascinating. I think that, you know, you've got this pressure on you that, you know what, you've got to choose a career at that point, but that's another story for another day. But the point being is that, you know, cutting a long story short, so the teenager feels what you feel emotionally. They feel what you feel, but can't express or process it in the same way that one can do when the brain's mature. So there is a case for sort of introducing mindfulness, you'd think, in schools and techniques to help develop, you would think. I'm saying it's the be-all end-all, it's going to help everybody, but there is a case for saying, okay, being able to sit with your feelings. Because there's a lot of social changes that happen in that period too. A lot of social and physiological changes that happen that don't keep pace with the brain. So for example, you know, you might have someone who obviously the hormonal changes, but the brain sort of hasn't caught up to nuance that or keep up with that. And you can see the impulsivity sometimes of teenager in reaction, and sometimes they can come across as being egocentric and the center of the universe, and can see all that sort of coming up really in that respect. So it's quite fascinating in that respect, but there is a correlation to emotional and social skills and exec functioning, big correlation. The flexibility, resilience, other controls, and with the right interventions, and some we cover on the course and some we don't, some I'll email you, then you can make the changes to improve. We can all be better. Obviously it's a biological. We've talked about nature, the combination of genes, environment, but we can all improve, one would think. They help manage ourselves to achieve a goal, the resources. When I say goal, not necessarily like a goal, like I'm going to climb Mount Everest. This could be like daily tasks. Getting up in the morning and getting dressed and making breakfast and paying the bills, and it can be something like that. When you sort of see some people struggle with that, to be adaptive in society, just skills like that, life skills, allows us to create a picture of a goal, to plan better, to understand resources. So even something like, for example, paying a bill or doing something, there we go.
Or not paying the bill.
Yeah. It's like the lights were out then, yeah. And just basic things like going shopping and writing a shopping list. So, when I used to work with young people in care, one of the things that we would do, for example, is, teach them how to budget. How you would budget and how you would go to the shop, and just general life skills. Because they're in the environment, they're going to come out of the environment at a certain age, and if they've got no understanding, it's a rude awakening, isn't it? It's tough, So just basic skills to do, understand the resources we need. From a children perspective, different rates for different children. Nature, nurture, genes, environment being a combination of the two. But they can all be improved. There's science behind that. I wrote an article on LinkedIn about that, about how it can be improved. It is possible. You can develop things with practice. One way to put it is like, think of a conductor of an orchestra. Think of a conductor. He or she directs all the instruments and players to play all at the right time. The tempo, the loudness, the key, the management and organisation of each member. Without the conductor, the music would not have the same smooth, rich tune. And that's sort of that frontal part of the brain. It sort of brings everything in synchronicity. Does that sort of make sense? So that's the sort of analogy. They can still play without the conductor. Don't tell the conductor that, he'll probably won't be very happy, but they can still play, yet they won't have that smoothness. Okay? And that for me is my metaphor for executive functioning. The frontal part of the brain, and to be able to pull all these things together. So a CEO of a company leads the work of success, can coordinate all these complex people in a work environment who bring all these different behaviours and skills, and you've got a wider range of skills in there. How do we integrate all that to share a common vision? In a sports team, you've got to motivate the players and give them the tools to win. That's one way to see executive functioning. So you've got in the sports team, you've got different positions, you've got different abilities, but then you've got to motivate them too, or find a way for them to motivate themselves. But then you've got to teach them how to win too as well. So that's sort of a couple of analogies for you. So for me, it's more like a management system of the brain. These mental functions work together to help us organise and manage many tasks in our daily life. Okay, so a general master plan can be used to achieve improvements by identifying weaker areas and setting achievable goals and monitoring progress and giving feedback. So with your clients, what you can do is sort of see where they are and play to their strengths, but also identify weaker areas and set achievable goals, manageable goals. Goals that you can monitor, improvement. So you do this now, and you can do that. Developmental goals are quite useful on our journey. Working memory plays an important role in reasoning, language ability, and visual understanding. Emotional control, also referred to as emotional regulation, is the ability to respond to situations and experience with emotions that are socially tolerable, balanced yet flexible. Now, you might behave in a certain way at work, you might behave in a certain way at home, you might respond in different ways in different situations. How adaptable are you at responding and regulating the emotion? You know, do you react or respond, or do you spend more time in reactive mode rather than respond mode? Okay, how does one respond? How does one adapt to experiences? Make that transition. One thing that's really important for young people growing up, it's really useful for them, because to be amongst the group and to make friends, then in the way the young person responds to the situation is really important, because what the young children do if someone responds in a way that is sort of out, I'm not suggesting there is a norm or not a norm, but outside the boundaries of the group, then what happens to the young person? They tend to sort of get cast aside, which is pretty sad in that sense, in one respect, and it's not good in that way. The ability to respond, we carry that through our life, socially acceptable responses. Now, it might not be finding the appropriate response at a certain time. So, when I used to work with people in care home, that's one area I would work on, because obviously, if you spoke to someone a certain way, you're going to get a different response. So, there was a cord not working in the the plug to the screen. So I found the right person to ask if they had a replacement that can adapt. And so emotionally, you might feel a bit flustered by the experience, thinking I'm not going to be able to do the presentation. But equally, how then do I regulate, or how do you regulate the emotion to ask someone in a calmer way? And you'll see that sometimes in coaching and coaches and how people do that, and you also see how sometimes in certain situations certain things evoke certain responses. Just if you don't want to take my word for it, then there's a park not far away from here, and they've got like kids football in the morning. But if you observe the parents, and some of their responses, at about 9 o'clock in the morning, or maybe your local park, or whatever. Have you ever seen parents behave? Yeah. I mean, how did they damn behave? They behave worse than the damn little 5-year-old running around. What chance has the 5-year-old got when the parents are telling the referee off? And how do we adapt to the experience? And you're probably wondering, well, yeah. But we all in jest, we've all done it, apart from you guys. You got perfect. And who's ever been sort of emotionally hijacked and had this sort of response, completely inappropriate response for that situation?
See that in the shops with mothers and babies.
Precisely. But no, absolutely. And the thing is, it's like, okay, let's say someone's had a go at the referee for whatever reason. They're not thinking at that point the referee's doing it from the goodness of their heart, not being paid, costing them money to go and referee a game. On top of getting a volley of abuse from the players, and they've got some parent on the touchline who hasn't lived their dreams, who's taking out their frustrations on everybody else. That doesn't come into the equation, does it? So the important thing about these skills too, they're linked to social functioning and academic performance and performance in general. Really useful. Better executive functioning means a person's better equipped to cope with life's demands and utilise the resources available to them. So taking that sort of deep breath and thinking, okay, I might be falling behind on my payments, I might have a flat tire, I might have had a sequence of events that aren't going well, and sort of being able to galvanise oneself and keep in that sort of respond mode, or work scenario, things aren't going to plan, and sort of stay with a level head in one respect. Cope, so you're able to go home and put the bat and ball away, or you're able to sort of stay focused on the task in hand, rather than overwhelmed by the permutations of what could and might not be. The association cortex integrates sensory and motor information to produce meaningful perception of the world around us. It allows abstract representations to force our flexible behaviour. So we talked about the appraisal situation. So you walk down the street, you see your friend, and they ignore you. You think they ignored you. Then you have a different response to if you thought they might not have seen you. So, for example, okay, you know, they're making redundancies at work, and the boss is hovering about, and normally they greet you in the morning and they walk straight past you. What's your immediate thought at that point?
I'm out of here.
Exactly, precisely. But you're not thinking at that point, well, maybe they've got so much on their own plate, they haven't seen you, or they could be made redundant. So these are many permutations. And what you do, you decide you're going to get on the email and send a scathing email about the boss, and you can't retract it no more. And you send the boss a scathing text, and you can't undo that anymore, can you? You know. But I was going to say we've all done it, but we haven't all done it, have we? You know, we haven't all done it. Before we sort of break, and I'm sort of mindful of lunch now. Anyone have come across the Walter Mischel marshmallow experiments in the 60s? Okay, there's a quite interesting experiment because, to cut a long story short, and I'm sure people could explain it to me, they take this group of, I think they were 5-year-olds, and what they did is the experiment centered around the, what you can do, sort of, you know, cutting a long story short, is, okay, you can have one marshmallow now. Okay, everyone loves a good marshmallow, especially with hot chocolate. Or I'm going to leave the room and I'm going to come back.
Oh, I've seen it done with
Yeah,
cake.
with 2 marshmallows.
Yeah.
Okay, so are you going to hold off? But then the other issue too, when's he going to come back? Or she going to come back? That's the other problem as well you've got. But the children with higher impulse control, what do you think they did? With more control of their own. Yeah, they didn't go for the one.
No, but they'd be going.
Precisely. But there is a danger there, by the way. There is a danger there too. I'm going to add to this. This is going to be my hypothesis.
Yeah.
What if they don't then come back? Then you missed your chance. Then you missed your chance. Yeah.
Also, though, if there's another child in the room that does it also, then the other one's going to be going, oh, maybe
Precisely.
I should.
Precisely. But the irony was that I believe someone did a longitudinal study on this. I don't know if it's true or not, but I believe the ones who just went for the one and didn't wait for the second one had lesser academic performance and social integration than the ones who held back.
Okay.
I stand corrected on that. There's probably a researcher that's going to email me now and correct me on that, but I believe loosely that was the case. But it does make sense, doesn't it, really, to be able to sort of, like, you know, control and our impulse, our inhibition in terms of emotion. Because if you think about it, if you sort of, you know, if you get cut up on the road and you decide I'm going to chase that person who's coming up on the road, you know, you might think you want to do that, but you don't do that, do you? You know, because you kind of think, well, I'm sort of going somewhere else now. That's far more important. This course is far more important than chasing that guy down. Or alternatively, you might just go past the drive-thru and think, well, should I stop? Should I stop and get one of those breakfast? Should I stop and get one of those breakfast things? You know, the lure, the smell of coffee. But having the ability, isn't it, sort of to nuance that and regulate that is key. Alternatively, you might be in a bar tonight and someone spills drink all over you, you know, and you feel like you just bought a brand new suit or a brand new outfit, and someone just, you know, bang, and they didn't do it intentionally, just not unintentionally, sort of one too fast. What's your immediate reaction? It might be, but you can nuance the anger, can't you?
Yeah.
Someone done that to me once on purpose.
Yeah.
Knocked a drink over me on purpose.
Okay, wow. And did we have the ability to nuance
I
it?
didn't react.
Yeah, but that was after this course. Prior to the course, you would have reacted. Yes, prior to the course, Kathy would have said, you know what, bang, you're having it. You're having it. A Liverpool kiss, man. Now, calm, centered. Yeah. But you've got the ability, see, and it doesn't surprise me that you wouldn't react, because you know, through our conversation, our experiences, you know, you can nuance it. What do you think someone who's got that low impulse control might? They might act out what's going through their mind, because through their mind you think, well, actually, you know what, I might spill one back over them. That's the least I can do. But what's that going to get you? You know, and that sort of, it goes to show how, you know, how important it is. People say, well, why do you place an emphasis on emotional intelligence and impulse control? Because it's a huge correlation. It's a massive correlation to behaviour, because you have the experience of the event, our thoughts about the event. It's in our appraisal that there's a mesh with our emotions, our behaviour, our physiology, and that happens like a two-way street. So our feelings will be there, our emotions primarily based on science that keep us alive. But to keep us alive thousands of years ago is different in some respects to keep us alive today. So someone taking something away from you, perceivably humiliating you, perceivably in the business world taking a job that you want, that's either taking something away from you, that's causing you a level of distress and emotional reaction. How do you react to that? And how you react to that is imperative. It's not as important as a marshmallow, nowhere near. And as we get to lunch, they actually do nice marshmallow. One thing I do remember of this place, the one thing I do remember the last time I did the course is there was a good, it might be too warm for that today anyway, so, but
You're planting the seed.
precisely, uncommissioned, so with that in mind, so sort of, after we come back from lunch, we're going to do some interactive and practical exercises in the manual and outside the manual to look at that and look at how ways that we can sort of be more self-aware, and also look at ways and for me, one of the great modalities I really have a passion for is mindfulness. It's a great modality to be able to be aware of, but not have to act on whatever's going on. And we'll just touch on some stuff after the break, after lunch. It's really useful and powerful to help on your journey. And like we mentioned before, it's the practicality and practicing is quite useful. If you break for lunch, and make sure you're all back and do come back. The impulse might take the hold and